You know, once upon a time, they used to open up important events with poems. So I'm going to start with a poem for us today. Even with enough shouting, in the quiet of our homes, do we share what's in our bones when it counts? Shock, shock, shocking us into life, we have to embrace the challenges, the strife that makes us crazy. We have no choice in the matter. We have our voices to help shatter the lies we tell ourselves that drag us down. Let us lift up, reach out, and breathe in the truth that is our voice. After all, it is our choice. The dream, the world, our home. Chicago, you may not know this, is the birthplace of, let me see if I can get this going here, is the birthplace of slam poetry. So we all have the ability to change the world. Every single one of us have the ability to change the world one step at a time. And we have all the tools that we need to do it, but most of all, we have the tool of our voice. And what is our voice? It may be considered to be our persona. It may be something that we consider to be part of our authentic being. But today we're going to talk about your voice and how you can use it to change things, how you can use it to change the world, to change your life, to change the people that you impact every day. What gets in the way? What gets in the way of finding and recognizing our voice? Any thoughts on this? Fear. It shuts us down. Fear absolutely shuts us down and shuts us up. And it gets in the way. And we're going to talk about the five things in confidence that can get in your way to stop you from getting the things that you need. But you want to fight being shut down. You want to fight not having your voice so that you can be able to affect the change that you need to affect in the world. Miles Davis said you have to play a long time to be able to play like yourself, and that's true. You have to know yourself and be a master of what it is that you're all about, of your character, of your history, and really go through and process the things that you experience in your life so that you're able to use these in a positive way and to be able to affect change. So what is your voice? How do you know when you found it? Why would you want it in the first place? Isn't it easier to be voiceless? Do you ever lose it? Do you ever lose your voice? And the answer is yes, we can. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about finding my voice. I'm going to tell you the first part of the story now. I'll tell you the rest of the story a little bit later. It's like this prolonged sort of thing. You're going to have to wait. I have very interesting examples for you, examples you've probably never heard of. I'm assuming, I'm just guessing, that these are going to be different. But it starts with me. Everything that isn't she adorable? Come on. That was me. That was me. I mean, come on. And you know, they say everything that you needed to learn, you learned in kindergarten. I believe that to be absolutely true. I wanted so much to perform for the talent show in kindergarten. I was ready. I had practiced. I've got no strings. I got no strings to hold me down. See, I'm ready now. I can perform it now. To make me fret or make me frown, I had strings, but now I'm free. There are no strings on me. And I had practiced. I would take people into my room at home, and I would set them down, and I would do my little dance, and I had my little song that I would perform. And the tape was always cued to the right spot so that I would be able to perform this at any time. I mean, I had it nailed. My mom would take me in to go shopping, and it would be like Walmart or something like that. And people that I just randomly met, I would perform this thing. I haven't changed that much. I mean, you know. So You know those people that after a couple of drinks, they start telling too many jokes or something like that. I don't sing I've Got No Strings, but I end up doing like performance poetry, so you see how this goes. So anyway, oops, yeah. So I wasn't a professional child actor. We know this to be the truth. But I was ready. I got up, I got in the middle of the stage. They opened up the curtains. The janitor who was working at the sound system had pulled up the tape that I was using. And we got ready to begin. Only they cued the wrong music. And what came up was I Can Fly. At that moment, I couldn't fly. At that moment, I was mortified. And I looked off stage, and I shook my head, and I ran off stage. The curtains closed. And that was my first experience being on stage. Can you believe it? So I wasn't well versed at that point in improv performances. I wasn't prepared for what would happen if the wrong music were cued. It's kind of like actually earlier when we were having issues with this thing, my response would have been, if I were still that 5-year-old today, my response would have been to shake my head and to run out of the room because suddenly things weren't going the way that I wanted them to. If I had had more confidence, if I had, and who has their voice at 5 years old? But some of us know what we want to do. We know the things that we want to achieve. If I had had more confidence in myself at the time, I would have either gone with I Can Fly, which I'm a performer, I could do that, or better yet, I would have calmly collected myself, walked off stage, and insisted that they cue the music to the appropriate place and start. I mean, it was kindergarten, come on. What would you do with more confidence? What would you do today if you were not afraid, if fear didn't stifle you? I want you to take the papers that you have out, and I want you to take a note and actually write down. I want you to take this opportunity to think about this and write it. Don't just contemplate it briefly and move on. I want you to actually write down, what would you do if you had more confidence today? How would it be different than what you've done before or what you've been doing? Some of you may say, there's not anything that I would do any differently. I'm living my life in the most full way that I possibly can. And that's great. That's absolutely fantastic. But most of us are holding back in some way. We're holding something back because of fear. We're holding something back because we're afraid of being shot down. So how would things be different for you if you had more confidence? Today we're going to have a little bit of discussion. I've heard that you're a vocal group, and from what I can tell from earlier this morning, that's the case. So I'm going to have a little bit of discussion in each of the groups with some guided questions. I'm going to have some interesting examples about people who have found their voices in different ways, in different forms. And I'm going to tell you their stories, ask you these questions, and we're going to break up into groups, and I'm going to give you a chance to come up, formulate your own answers. But first, let's talk about why people lack confidence. And there's the big 5. We talked about one of them earlier, but there are other reasons too. And they're all pretty much based in fear. Fear is one of them. Excessive expectations. All of you are leaders in here. So how many of you are actually holding yourself to such a high level of expectation that you're constantly afraid of letting yourself down? You're afraid that you're not achieving your absolute best. Does that resonate with anyone? Yeah? You feel like you could be doing so much more, but there's something that's holding you back, and that is you have this excessive expectation about what it is that you're supposed to achieve. There are only 24 hours in a day. You're only one human being. And if you were talking to someone else and they were explaining to you what they had, what they were facing, what they were up against, what they were trying to do, what kind of advice would you give to them? Would you be as hard-nosed about your expectations of them as you are of yourself? The second big hit that we have to confidence is harsh self-judgment. So you're holding yourself to this higher, exacting standard. And when something doesn't go right, how do you talk to yourself? How do you address yourself? Are you overly harsh? What's your self-talk like? You know, what's interesting is that a lot of times we don't take the time to really voice how it is that we talk to ourselves. If we wrote down the things that we tell ourselves in our heads when something doesn't go right, if we actually wrote it down, or if we, oh my gosh, said it out loud, can you imagine the way that it would come out? Oh, that was stupid. Oh, dumb, 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 you know. How could I have done that? That's the most idiotic thing. Why did I say that? Would you be that way to somebody else? It's easy to see how this can shut you down, how this can lead you to have a lack of self-confidence. We talked about this one. This one's pretty obvious. Fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of what's going to be coming your way that you're not aware of, fear of being successful. What happens if this really takes off and people are coming at me from all over the place, and am I going to be able to take it up to that next level? Lack of experience. This is like somebody being put in charge of something financial and they can't even balance their checkbook, you know? And that leads us to the final one, lack of skill. So if I got up here and somebody said, okay, it's time for us to do a duet, you're on the oboe. I have a lack of skill. There's absolutely no way that that would fly. So don't worry. Poetry, yes. Oboe, no. So you want to develop lasting confidence, you must know these three things. You must know how to handle thoughts and feelings effectively. And how do you do that? You assess your feelings, you assess your thoughts, you would address them, and then you accept them. And the way that you can do this is that you can write them down or you can voice them. How many times are you driving in your car and you're listening to a podcast, or you're listening to the radio, you're like satellite radio, something, not that I do this myself, but you're listening to an audio book, something like that, and you could be using that time to actually be digesting some of the self-talk, the feelings that you have that you're concerned about. You could be using that time to voice those things and to address them. If you don't address them, a lot of times we sublimate and we'll swallow our feelings. We'll swallow the way that we are concerned about things, the way our fears, and we won't actually address them in a meaningful way. And if you address them, you assess them, you address them, and you accept them. And accept the fact that you're having those feelings. It doesn't mean that they're right. It just means that you're accepting the fact that you're having those, that you're aware. And that awareness will bring you freedom. That awareness will take you out of this place of fear. You want to know how to take control of your actions, and that means facing the fact that you have responsibility. You have responsibility for yourself, for the things that you do. A lot of times we'll put it on something else. We're afraid to take responsibility for the fact that something didn't work out the way that we wanted to. And we might be blaming ourselves and saying, oh, that was stupid, stupid, stupid. And then in the next moment, we're saying, but if Frank hadn't done this, then that wouldn't have happened. and we don't put responsibility on our own actions. We have to have responsibility, address ourselves with kindness, and accept the way that we're feeling. And third, we want to engage fully in what you're doing. I saw everyone who had raised their hands for going to the gym this morning. I saw everyone who raised their hands for saying that they participated in yoga this morning. And this has to do with mindfulness. This has to do with being present, to be in the present moment. So how is it that you are fully appreciating where you are now and experiencing everything that you're feeling right now? I have to give you kudos. This is probably one of the most aware and awake audiences at this time in the morning. You're doing fantastic. I feel like you're very present in the moment, so thank you. So this goes to one of my interesting examples that I wanted to share with you, and then we're going to have a little bit of discussion. So how many of you are familiar with the Beastie Boys? Yeah, we've heard of them. I'm guessing that you're not their target demographic, but we've heard of them, you know, we have an awareness of them. And the Beastie Boys have an interesting story, okay? So the Beastie Boys, these crazy guys from New York, formed as a punk band. And they formed as a punk band, they were performing all around New York, had some regional success, and as they were performing and trying out new things, they did sort of a joke song. It was a humorous song that they tried to mesh hip hop with punk. And they did it as a joke. It wasn't even supposed to be something that was an ongoing thing. But they had a lot of fun doing it. And it became one of their most successful songs. So they pursued that. They kept going after that, not because it was successful, but it was because they were having fun. They realized that while they were doing this song, they actually really, really enjoyed what they were doing. It became something fresh and new to them. So it became this fusion of punk and hip hop. And so they experimented with it, had a successful album in 1984, and by 1985 they were touring with Madonna. That's how quick they skyrocketed once they found their voice. So my question to you is this: in thinking about the Beastie Boys and thinking about how they married hip hop and punk, how can you look at new things in your life and to add them to be sort of a fusion of something new? What should you maybe take away, and what should you add? So I'm going to, well, I don't have to break you up. You're in different groups. I want you to address this question. What is your passion? What should you leave behind? And I'm going to add one to this. What should you maybe add to what you're already doing to freshen your voice, to revive? And as you're writing these things down, I want you to share with your neighbors, okay? We're going to pull a couple from the audience. Okay, 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. Thank you, thank you. So I want to pull someone from the audience to share something, someone who got volunteered, actually. So you want to share what your passion is and share what you should leave behind, what you should add.
One of the things at our table that we had a common theme is the passion of good staff nursing, quality care for the inpatients, and really supporting the staff nurses in-house. And what I shared is the thing that I am extremely passionate about it, was I have to step back and leave behind my expectations of how they should fix the problems that they work with every day, and just be able to put it to them and say, what do you think is happening? What is it that you think could help? And figure out and assist them in helping them figure out what to do on the floors to give better care for the patients with diabetes. What would we add? We didn't get that far.
No, actually, we did.
Okay.
You said what you would add is the attention to their needs and expectations.
All right. Did anyone else have anything that they wanted to add? That was wonderful. Anyone else feel inspired? Over here. All right. You're like, it's in the morning. I don't have that much inspiration for the morning. Yeah.
Okay, I was very selfish. I did an unwork-related thing. But my passion is to have fun. And I was sharing with the group that I'm single. I don't have any children. I have a lot of married friends. And it's hard to find people to go have fun with when you're not married and all your friends are married, because you're always the fifth wheel, whatever. So what I want to leave behind is just that, that feeling that I can't go and do things because I'm on my own. And it's not like I sit at home and wait for things to happen, but I want to travel. I want to go do fun things. And I want to be safe, too. I mean, you don't want to go on single vacations by yourself as a female. You want to be smart, or I want to be smart. And then what I need to add is probably just a little bit more courage to just kind of step up and go and maybe join some groups. In fact, I got invited on a trip to Ireland and Germany and some other place, and then I got a referral to an adventure company that her friend owns. So I'm on my way.
Excellent. That's what we like to hear. Okay. You can send referrals my way too. That's interesting. I'm not single, but I'm still interested. All right. So Jackson Pollock is our next example. Now, many of you probably know about Jackson Pollock. You may have even seen a movie that came out several years ago that had to do with his life story. But what's interesting about this, and I want you, I kind of wanted to stay on this slide because on the next one, this is what happens to the writing because of the background. Look at that. That's so disgusting. It's so scary. Studied traditional techniques under Thomas Hart Benton. So he actually, Jackson Pollock, was not considered to be the best painter in his own family. His brother was actually supposed to be considered the best painter in his family. And his brother was studying under Thomas Hart Benton. Jackson joined him and began studying this traditional style of painting, and actually didn't do as well as his own brother did. However, he became inspired when he saw Pablo Picasso's work and went into abstract expressionism. And this really seemed to hit home with him. He actually honed his skill and began experimenting with abstract expressionism and became known as the top American painter in abstract expressionism because of this. Now, he found success as he found his voice, as he found his way of expressing himself. He found his voice, but things don't always, just because you find your voice, it doesn't mean that you have it forever, right? Things change. The outside world can change around you, and it can make you feel very distanced from that voice again. So what happened with him was that he actually found success, but then in the excesses of success and alcoholism and things like that, it led to his downfall. And he actually, his art didn't do as well in his later years as he sort of lost himself. And so my question to you is this: what anchor, not anger, what anchors you? How can you find yourself? What is it that when things get shaky in this world, it actually brings you back to center? And I'll give you some hints. There are 4 different quadrants that you can find a way to anchor yourself. One is in the emotional quadrant, and it might be a connection to a family member. Maybe for me, my daughter, that's one way that I sort of balance myself. I find myself as, I'm like passionate about being her mom, right? physical quadrant, which can be maybe you go into a practice like yoga, where you're able to center yourself that way and be able to find yourself that way. Through intelligence, and so that can actually be through the intellectual pursuit of maybe something that you study that sort of, that centers you. You always come back to that one thing. And through spiritual. And there can be a connection between spiritual and, say, physical. For those people who do practice yoga, a lot of times they'll see a spiritual connection. For people who dance, you know, a lot of times there's a spiritual connection there as well as a physical one. So in the act of getting into your own body, you're able to center yourself and anchor yourself, and it helps to find your voice again. So why don't you get into your groups again, and I want you to talk about what anchors you and how can you find yourself. This one was a quick one. 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. Thank you. So who has some passions that they want to share with us? What anchors you? What anchors you? All right. And introduce yourself too, because we're missing out on the introduction.
Jane Seeley.
Okay.
I work in New York. Everyone knows that without my mouth. And my passion is my patience. No matter how difficult it is throughout the day, and it could be really difficult, and I am the only diabetes educator, nurse practitioner for 1,000 beds, which is, and I really connected to what you said. And I could go crazy. And I could storm out of the room.
You could. You could
could.
shake your head and run out. But
What about those patients?
the patience.
You know, and I think about the big picture all the time, and how I alone can't see all of these patients, and I always tell administration, do the math.
Yeah.
You know, and how everything that I know, my goal is that every nurse knows what I know, which is really hard. But, you know, a lot of them are very interested, and a lot of them become CDEs.
So when you...
She just became a CDE.
Congratulations,
recently.
yes.
New to diabetes. I'm a newbie here in a leadership meeting. So that's what really makes it all worth it every single day. I never get up in the morning to go to work and think, oh, I have to go to work. I can't even relate to that. I hear people say that. Like, what's wrong with them?
That's beautiful.
I really feel that way, and it's been 30 years of doing diabetes.
Wow. Let's applaud that, guys.
So did I answer your question?
That answered the question. So you feel that the patients actually anchor you?
Yes. And I just wanted to quote my favorite person.
Okay.
Which isn't a rock star, and I'm surprised about that, knowing myself why it's not. It's Rachel Remen. I don't know if you're familiar with Rachel Remen. She's written one of my favorite books, Kitchen Table Wisdom. She is a traditionally trained pediatrician originally, but she's gone way off into spiritual things. And she says, and I hear her words in my head all the time, show up, pay attention, let go of outcomes.
Let go of outcomes.
Let go of outcomes is the really important part.
Yeah.
And I do that every single day, and that anchors me.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Can you...
Show up, pay attention, that's the easy part. The hard part is let go of outcomes. And we really need to do that more, I think.
That's right.
Thank
and what
you.
was her name again?
Rachel Remen, R-E-M-E-N. And her book is called Kitchen Table Wisdom, and it's one of my favorite books. It's a good bathroom book because you can read little sections at a time. It's stories her patients told her. It's wonderful.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. Does anyone else have something that they want to share? What anchors you? All right. Back here. Nadine has it.
My family is a good anchor for, I have two things that anchor me. My family is a great anchor. My husband especially, he's kind of opposite of me, and I kind of am going, woo, out there, and he kind of, you know, is more logical and realistic and all that stuff. So we're good for each other, because sometimes I'd have to tell him to, you know, think outside the box. But it's good for me to be brought back in the box once in a while as a check. And my spiritual life, I feel like the spiritual side of us is often if you have a three-legged stool of mental, physical, and spiritual, the spiritual leg is often atrophied, and because we don't have time for that. We do our exercise, we do our mental stuff to keep our jobs going, but we forget that we really have to feed our souls. And so I was going through a really busy time a few months ago, and so I met with a spiritual advisor once a week for several weeks, because I felt like if I didn't ground myself there, I was going to go nuts, because I was opening a new office and moving my mother-in-law to assisted living, and anyways, I knew I needed that. And I just think that because meditation and prayer, it doesn't seem, spending very much time in that, it seems like we're wasting time, and I think we have to not only allow ourselves, but give ourselves the gift of taking time for the spirituals. And it doesn't matter whether you believe in God or not. We all have spirits.
Right.
So,
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. The interesting thing is that I actually went through a time 2 years ago where I felt that I had really lost my voice. I'd really lost my way, kind of. And everything seemed to be in turmoil. My job, I wasn't happy with what I was doing. I wasn't getting up in the morning and saying, oh my gosh, I love what I do, my family seemed to be disrupted. Everything seemed to sort of be messed up. And I was so caught up in that race to achieve. I was so caught up in that sort of have to move forward that even my reading all the time had to do with business books and moving ahead. And how many of you can identify with that, where you're constantly reading the business books and you're like, okay, this has to be my nonfiction, that I have to be getting something out of this in order to move ahead. And what ended up happening was I had to slow down a little bit, reconnect, and I did. I went back and I realized that the most important thing to me, was my family, was looking at my daughter. And then I took time to do things like read fiction, which sounds like a very small thing. I mean, it's not even seeing a spiritual advisor, it's not, which I think is an amazing idea. But I just took time to read fiction for a while, to get back into poetry, to get back into reading stories about people who never existed. And it changed me. It changed the way that I was reflecting on myself and on the world around me, and I grew from that. And for me, that was a big way that I changed. That was an anchor for me. So I can take you through the next example, and that is Ani DeFranco. Ani DeFranco, are any of you familiar with Ani DeFranco? The name's familiar, not as many people. And this is why you probably haven't heard of her. She is a modern feminist, and that's not why you haven't heard of her. The reason why you probably haven't heard of her is she created her own record label called Righteous Babe Records. Okay, let me try. All right, we'll go to Ani. She created her own record label called Righteous Babe Records, and has figured in as being a young role model for modern feminists. And one of the things that she's done is she created this retreat on a plantation. Now this just happened in December of 2013, okay? So this just happened. Can any of you see why modern day feminists and people who are proponents of equal rights might have a problem with meeting on a plantation? Yes. Right. So you can see that there was this huge social media firestorm that brewed as a result of this, where people were saying, Righteous Babe Records, is it only a few? Is it only a select few who you're inviting? Who wants to meet on a plantation? Now, what Ani said was, haven't you listened to my words all these years? Haven't you read the things that I've written? I wanted to have this on the plantation because I viewed the plantation. She had recently relocated to New Orleans. she wanted to use the plantation as both an attendee and a witness to what was being held. She wanted to change the past and sort of use that as a way to recognize what had happened and to have that be included in the conversation that was happening there. So she came out and she was very forthcoming in her opinion about this stuff. She said, I still want to have the retreat, but in an effort to have full disclosure, she did end up not having the retreat at all. She decided that it might cause too much hurt if she had it there at the plantation, and she wanted to wait for things to sort of quiet down. Now, all of that's to say that when we find our voice and have our voice, that doesn't mean that things always go our way. That doesn't mean that things always, no matter what the best of our intentions, that doesn't mean that people always fully understand what we're about or what we're trying to accomplish. So what do you stand for, and how does this impact how others see you? That's your discussion topic for right now. I want you to think about that. What do you stand for, and how does this impact how others see you? 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. So who wants to share what you stand for and how this impacts how others see you? Who has something to share about that? Right back there? All right.
Well, at Healthcare Partners, I work with over 30 other diabetes educators, and among 35 or so of us, I'm the only clinical exercise physiologist there. So what they see, well, I stand for exercise and physical activity. And from the feedbacks I got from my coworkers or colleagues is I make a positive impact on them, and that they see me as a resourceful person to address or to ask questions when it comes to exercise and diabetes management.
Wonderful, thank you. Who else? Let's get one more, and then I have an example from one of you. All right. Anybody else? Right back there? All right.
Well, our main thing that probably everybody at the table decided is we stand for being a patient advocate. I mean, that's what we're here to do. We're here to teach our patients, but we're here to protect them. And we're trying to protect them against, like, raspberry ketones, if I hear one more thing about raspberry ketones. So it's
Raspberry
kind of like
ketone.
trying to be there for the patient and be a sounding board for some of the issues that they have, but also give them good information too.
We had a quick question up here. What are raspberry ketones? Can you explain that a little bit?
Let the dietitian.
Okay. I was going to say, you know, I have a bottle of them, and I'm not even sure what they're supposed to do, so. Okay. All right. So diabetes educator, I actually asked a couple of people from the group in here about their own experiences. And one answer that I got back, I'm going to read directly. Do you have any examples of times when you've overcome your fears or other obstacles to achieve what you wanted? Someone's like, yeah, always. Okay. One of the major examples is getting our coordinating body started and leadership going. The coordinating body has been behind in the transitions from chapters to the local networking groups and coordinating body concept. We've had lack of leadership to get it going. We now have a governing document along with strong supportive leaders on our CB. We are in the process of planning a statewide educational conference in 2014, and this is quite exciting and looking forward to move forward. So what are examples of times when you've overcome your fears to achieve what you wanted? How can you use your voice, and how will you use your voice now as a leader? How can you use your voice, and how will you use your voice now as a leader? Discuss. All right, everyone. That was a quick one. But we've got about 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure that we have time to hear everybody. How can you use your voice? How will you use your voice now? Who has an example that they want to share? How can you use your voice? And how will you use your voice now? Yes. Hi there.
Hi, Starlin, Illinois. We discussed at our table about not using our voices.
Wow, you're rebels.
So, listening to others, our patients, our family, our CB members, our members who have not come forward and are out there in the shadows, because if we're chatty, talking, delegating, we're not listening to what people need. So sometimes, although we've kind of found our voices, but sometimes we have to damper the voice.
Right. What do you think about that? That's a good one. Knowing when to listen. And I mean, when we're talking about our voice, we're talking about our personas, but you know, it's an interesting perspective to think, okay, when do we need to be quiet? When do we need to listen? Do we have another example? All right, right over here. Wonderful. I love that color, by the way. That's beautiful.
I'm Marie Shankar. I am from upstate New York, and what we have done with we just became members of our coordinating body, and we're the Albany chapter. We're called New York Northeast LNG. And what we have done in our group, and I've been past president, and this is our co-president sitting next to me, is we've given small little jobs, and we call them facilitators, and therefore people are less fearful of becoming members and volunteering. But also, one of the things that I've had to do is I've had to ask people to become leaders in whichever way. And that was hard for me to do, yet it really made a difference. And what Jane had said is that some people are waiting to be asked because they're afraid to say something on their own to become involved.
Excellent.
Can I just comment on you? I'm the New York State CB chair. She did this in 2 months. She totally organized the Northeast New York Diabetes Educators Group. It got the whole leadership group together. I was just amazed, because that was one group that had fallen off AADE. And 2 months. So it shows it works.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And good job. So the confidence cycle, now that we know a little bit more about our voices and about confidence, which is not synonymous with voice, but it is a major part of it. A lot of times, unless you have your voice, you don't feel that you have the confidence that you need. The confidence cycle includes 4 steps. Number 1, practice the skills. So you're thinking about looking at your thoughts and feelings, dealing with your thoughts and feelings, and you're assessing them, you're addressing them, and then you're accepting them. And then you're looking at taking responsibilities for your actions. And then the 3rd is my favorite, where you're being present in the moment. The 2nd step is to apply these skills effectively. The 3rd is to assess the results. We always want to assess and think about what we're processing here. And then the 4th is modifying as needed. So, still not a child actor, but I will give you a little bit of a continuation of my story. Instead of never getting back on stage again, I ended up in Chicago with an international slam poetry competition. Yeah. And I want to tell you, poetry, not dancing, audience in the hundreds, and media teams were there. So I get up on stage, and it's, you know, sometimes how in your life you'll notice cycles, it'll come full circle. And even though I had been on stage for different things before, this is what happened. I end up on stage, no curtains this time. I end up on stage, and I get ready to start, and I choke. I completely blank, all right? And it was like everything from my past, from when I was 5 years old, flooded in my brain again. And the only thing I could think of was, leave the stage, leave the stage. But I'm there, and I stop, and I pause, and I anchored myself. And not that I know that I was calling it that. At that time, I was just like, oh my gosh, okay, what am I thinking? And anchored myself, though, got myself calmed down, and I started again. And I said, poetry can only get you so far until you talk about exes and revenge. And the beginning of my poem just rolled out. The tape was rolling. And that was featured on 60 Minutes. Yeah, on 60 Minutes. So if you saw me at that time, I was under my maiden name, Kiki Kaufman. But I was featured on 60 Minutes with that part. And who knew that I could have just as easily, you know, just run off the stage and left the stage. But that happened here in Chicago. So I think it's actually meaningful that I'm talking to you today about voice. And I think also that you don't have to be on 60 Minutes for your voice to matter. But what you need to do is realize that you can change the world if you listen to your voice one step at a time and breathe. Thank you.